Veterans Affairs is backing off enforcement of a controversial disability rating rule just days, in fact, after putting it in place. The VA had issued an interim final rule, they say, that clarified how disability ratings should factor in the impact of medication. The rule stated the VA examiners would evaluate veterans based on their actual level of impairment while using prescribed treatment, rather than estimating how severe their condition might be without medication. The department said the move was prompted by an ongoing court case and that could have required the VA to speculate about untreated symptoms, potentially complicating hundreds of thousands of disability claims and slowing benefit decisions, they said. But critics raised concerns over the clarification and how it could reduce disability ratings for some veterans. Now, VA Secretary Doug Collins says enforcement of the rule is being halted immediately. In a statement, Collins says while the department disagrees with how the rule has been characterized, VA takes veterans' concerns seriously. The department will continue accepting public comment, but the rule will not be enforced at any time in the future. For now, disability evaluations will continue under existing practices while the VA reviews feedback. Public comments on the halted rule remain open, though, through April 20th.
So this is a fascinating thing to talk about. I know there's a lot of excitement today. The tariff ruling from the Supreme Court's exciting. Obviously, there's a lot going on. We're talking about the buildup in Iran. I get that. But I wanted to talk about this specific issue. So for those of you, if you missed it, because there's a lot of veterans thing, I know you guys aren't all veterans, but I appreciate you. What happened was this week, the VA just quietly added a permanent rule, saying that a disability rating for a veteran who served in their military will be based not on the actual injuries or the disability itself that they got in the military. So as you leave the military, but if medication makes it better, and if the medication has made it better, or treatment, say sleep apnea using a CPAP, then you're not actually disabled. Needless to say, this caused a lot of angst in the veteran, a lot of anger in the veteran community. So let's start at the top. First of all, why? Let's start at the top. Let's start the political side of this. The political side of this is that one of the biggest targets that Project 2025 always had was veterans' disabilities. For years now, those on the right have been actively seeking to reduce the cost of veterans' benefits because, let's be honest, billions of dollars is paid to those of us who served and have disabilities. So for clarification, so you guys understand my story, I am a 100% disabled veteran for my service. But the thing is, we kind of saw this coming. And for those of you who paid attention, you remember I used to do a show on the VoteVets channels. The VoteVets channels, VoteVets posed this very clearly. This is what Project 2025 said. Now, this graphics, a year and a half, oh gosh, almost 2 years old now. They wanted to push veterans to for-profit care. They wanted to cut our disability benefits. They want to gut specialized care for veterans and outsource it. And they want to get Trump loyalists over to expertise. Now, I don't know how I ever frame this in any other way other than I told you so. Okay. We told you a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that the goal will be to cut disability benefits. And they weren't sure. And it literally says on page 649 and 650 of Project 2025 that the way to do that would be to put in new rules that limit the amount of disability that new veterans going forward get, and then carefully peel back the disability ratings and disability payments to existing veterans. And the reason this rule got so much upset was because of the fact that in the rule, the way it was framed is if a veteran goes in for a treatment or he goes in for a checkup, it was possible under this rule that if his disability has gotten better through medication, that he would lose that disability. Now, imagine you're me. You're a 100% disabled veteran, but it's not me. Let's say you're a veteran whose only money he gets, maybe he's formerly homeless. Maybe he's just on the edge of homelessness. And he's been rated with, say, 50% disability from the VA, which gives him a lot of benefits, including healthcare. But it's about $1,800 a month for 50% disability. That's it. $1,800 a month for 50% disability. If he goes to get treatment at the VA for, let's say he's got PTSD or he's got depression and he's on a medication that's helped, they could actually take away his benefit. They could take away his disability rating, take that money away. So this means that two things are happening. One, veterans are going to have to go forward, making a choice to take their medications to make the things that the disabilities that they have better, so they don't risk losing their disability payments, or one, simply not get treatment at all, or constantly be afraid to go to the VA for treatment and find out that you could lose your benefits, because that's what's going to happen. And they're using AI to do this. So the worry is, you go to your doctor, the doctor fills out the paperwork, says, "Oh, a veteran responded well to knee replacement. He no longer has knee pain since his knee's been replaced." AI catches that, says, "Oh, so his knee is better. I guess he doesn't. He guess that's no longer a disability, and they take away your benefit." That's literally what the rule said. And VA fought this tooth and nail. And when we called it out, when veterans called it out, when the House Veterans Affairs Committee called it out, Doc Collins went into hyperdrive. Collins calling it, this is fake. This has always been the way. This is a lie. This is literally just the other day with Collins screaming that this was, quote, fake news, that what we were saying, all of us veterans, all the veteran service organizations, everyone, was a lie. And look how long, and that, by the way, that's day one. And here's day two. You can't see it. Maybe you can zoom in there, Satchel. This is the tweet. This is the tweet that ended up rescinding it. Now, there's several things I want you to know here. One, and here's the lessons learned, guys. One, our voices matter. Okay. The entire veteran community, the veteran supporting community, the veteran service organizations, Congress, Democratic member Congress, and even a few Republicans, even Derek Van Orton rolled in on this, if you believe that. Derek Van Orton, one of the most MAGA Republicans there is, who sits in the VA committee, rolled in saying, hold up here. Hold up. You just snuck this through. There was no oversight hearings about it. There was no public comment. They literally implemented the rule and then opened public comment until April 20th. That was flooded overnight with thousands of comments saying how outrageous this was. Many people were frustrated, and it only took a day for go from Collins calling us all liars to rescinding the rule. Now, here's the problem. He didn't actually rescind it. All he's done is suspended enforcement. So we haven't won the battle yet, but it does go to those several lessons. One, your voice matters still. Two, this is what they're doing, folks. If you don't doubt, they're implementing Project 2025 piece by piece by piece. And you're a veteran. Veterans know already this is happening. They added more money to private health care, what they call community care, than they did in-service care, in VA hospital care this year. The new budget has more for outsourcing. They just tried to cut our benefits. They're gutting specialized care to outsource it again and again. And of course, don't even get me started about loyalty over expertise. The people they put into VA are outrageously political people. And so all the predictions we made about Project 2025 are coming true. But the best part is we used our voices and we got together and we fought together and we beat this back. And that, to me, is the lesson. And that's the best part as we go into the show to talk about this stuff with our guests. Because as always, believe it or not, you guys say, how does Fred's intros have anything to do with the guest? Well, every time they do, because I've got an amazing guest, a sociology professor, Dr. Charles Derber, who has got a great book out about populism and fighting populism and fighting right-wing possible. And what the lesson learned here is, one of his big lessons is, if we band together and unify our voices across political spectrums and backgrounds, we can fight back against this creeping authoritarianism and this right-wing populism. And guess what? Doug Collins handed us an example of that this week, where an outrageous authoritarian power grab that would impact over 9 million veterans who have given our lives in service to this country. Okay. I got 2 fake knees. My left foot was fused at the joint because of an injury from Iraq. Both my shoulders are torn. I had my first back surgery of what's estimated to be at least 3 to 5 back surgeries in the future. Does that mean I'm no longer disabled because I'm not in constant pain? That's what they want to tell you. And then they're going to try and frame us as freeloaders because we're getting this free healthcare, and all that money. So that's how we fight back. So I'm excited to have a great guest. You know, I always get the great guests. It's Friday night here in the Midas Touch Network. As always, I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Demise, the FP Wellman. So glad to have you guys here. You know what? Let's get on the show. Satchel, hit it. I'm not going to draw my hands on the desk this week because last week the dogs went nuts. They thought someone was at the door. So I'm Fred Wellman. Welcome back. I'm still that guy who was here 30 seconds ago. We have got a great guest and a great show to talk. Charles Derber is a professor of sociology at Boston College. He's written 30 books on politics, democracy, fascism, corporations, capitalism, climate. I'm reading The culture war social change. His latest book is Fighting Oligarchy: How Positive Populism Can Reclaim America. This is the book, Fighting Oligarchy. I'm so glad to have Charles Derber. Charlie, welcome to the show. Come on, join me, Charlie.
Very much, Freddie. It was wonderful listening to your story. It would fit right in the forward of my book. The story you told is really the story of my book in many ways, which is that as grim and dire as things are, when people get together, and they are getting together, and your
Yep.
story is really a fantastic. I mean, if I had known that story, if it, I would have put it right center in my book because
There you go. So I do, man. I tie it all together.
yeah, I mean, you're sort of showing that there's a good kind of populism. When people hear the word populism, they often think either of Trump or far right stuff and authoritarian stuff. And there is that brand of very dictatorial, which is really corporations coming together with the government to do exactly what happened with the veterans thing.
Yeah.
Basically, in the name of protecting workers, they're eliminating all kinds of quote big government that actually are really important for ordinary people like veterans who have served the country. So the argument in this book is really an extension of your story in a way, Fred. It's really a story about all the different Fred Wellmans and all the different people who are seeing, in the name of populism, are seeing their democracy and their benefits being stripped away. And who gets the result? These billionaires
Yeah.
like Elon Musk and Bezos and all these people in Silicon Valley who have more money than any people in history, whose
Yep.
taxes are being lowered. And the way that can be happening is only if they cut your taxes and then cut these programs.
Got these benefits, right? Yeah, and implement their change, right? And steal our data to use it, and use AI instead of humans to understand our
Right.
lived lives. And it is very funny. One of the stories I tell often, Charlie, is when I did seek, I never saw the PTSD diagnosis. I didn't. It's a
Mm.
long story, but when I finally decided to go in and put in for it, it was a really, it's a very traumatizing, as some of my fellow peers have said, it's re-traumatizing because you have to sit down with a psychiatrist, you go through all,
Right.
you wed men you lost, which we're going to talk about, 'cause today's the 35th anniversary, the first time I lost men in combat. Today is that anniversary, and so you had to go all back through that. It's got its own special kind of traumatization, and to go through that, and so I did it. I finally did it, and it was tough and knocked me off my heels for a minute there. And but the best part was nobody evaluated by AI. I got a call about 2 months later after I turned it all in, and a former sergeant in the army called me who worked for the VA, and he called to tell me I'd filled out some paperwork wrong. But he also said, Colonel Wellman, I got to tell you something. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and your story is one of the toughest ones that's ever come across my desk for
Mm.
PTSD. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I want to let you know that we're going to be giving you 100% disability for what you had to go through. And that mattered. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that mattered. And I think that's the other part that bothers me about the situation is you've been watching it, Charlie, professionally, is they're dehumanizing the people they're supposed to represent. That is part of right wing populism, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
let's start the beginning. One of the things you mentioned in the book is Trump's trick, right? You talk about you framed as Trump's trick, how the steps of earlier far right populists, but it was distinctive. So even though when we do that, we talk about Mussolini, we talk about obviously Hitler, other far right populist movements, especially Mussolini. Ruth Ben Ghiat's been on my show.
But also in America, there's a long history.
And in America, there is, yeah.
There was the
What was different?
first movement. It's
Yeah,
important people know that. One of the reasons Trump's trick has worked is that there's a long history. I mean, think of America First in the 30s. It was a pro-Nazi group that said they were fighting for the American worker and they were going to attack. So it's not just in Europe and the fascists in Europe. There's a fascist tradition in the United States, and yet, like I just want to go back to your story for a minute, Fred. It's a paradigm example because in a way it's a painful story to listen to. As I didn't know this story till I just listened to it, and I'm really sorry what you had to go through. At the same time, it's a good news story that you guys fought back. You fought back. You're running for Congress. You're getting a lot of support on these issues, and that's the good news here, which is that despite this long, terrible history of fascism and authoritarianism in America under the rubric of right wing, populism, that people are told this is going to help you. What right wing populism has always done in America is strip away the benefits of that you're being, that they're threatening you with stripping away right now.
right.
There is an alternative to that, And so part of the good news is that people are rejecting right now. They're out in the streets. They're rejecting an awful lot of this far right history that Project 2025 and all of its measures are not popular in America. And so that's one thing. And they're out in the streets protesting. At the same time, one of the reasons they're there is that there is a kind of I don't know if you knew this before. I don't know if you saw this in the book, but in the first chapter of the book, I show what ordinary people are thinking. And what they're thinking is whether they're Republican or Democrats or independent. And I was surprised at the level of this, but it's been true for a couple of years. It's
Yeah,
under Trump.
we're seeing it both.
People are hating the big corporations. They don't like the way this country is being run right now. And partly because they're having personal experiences just like you are. I mean, the Trump budget last year, 2025, the quote, big, beautiful, ugly bill. I
Big
mean,
billionaires. Called the big billionaire, Charlie.
yeah.
Big billionaire.
What was that about? It was stripping away veteran benefits. It was about stripping away health care. It was about stripping away knocking off unions. It was about all the things that people have come to depend on just for survival. The reality is that most Americans, like you, are finding that, you know, the way this system is working is undermining their basic security. About 75% of Americans say, well, 60% of Americans, that's a great majority. There, by the way, that's 60% are also about 60% of Americans don't ever go to college. Satchel's going to college, right?
Yeah.
That's unusual. That's a privilege. In America, most people are finding they don't have the means to go to college. Moreover, the ordinary person, just like what you're going through in your story, is going through what you're going through. They're finding that right-wing populism, and there's a long history of this, but it's still very powerful because the big money in this country supports it. The trick is to say that you're going after big change and dealing with these bad corporations, but the trick is finding a way of actually, as Trump has done, he ran against all the people that he's now aligning with, right? All these billionaires that he said he was going to, drain the swamp and stop, whether it's the Epstein stuff or it's all the tax benefits of these rich people. He ran on this. People believed him. And the Democratic Party has a role in this because they were not talking with the kind of fervor that you were about the problems that ordinary people are experiencing.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, Charles. I want to segue into that because you do say, you're very pointed in your criticism, saying, in many ways the Democratic Party did sort of hand America to Trump through the neoliberal politics, as you do talk about identity politics. I'm sure you're getting pushed back on that. I mean, pull that string a little bit. How did these last two cycles lead to this?
It's more than that. If you go back, remember, 60% of Americans don't go to college. They're working people. Back in the Great Depression, the New Deal, the period of that from about the 1930s to the 1970s, working class people voted for the Democratic Party overwhelmingly,
Right.
Then what happened is that the Democratic Party began to withdraw from its, Reagan came in, the 70s was a stagflation period. Reagan succeeded blaming that on the New Deal and sort of liberal, big government Democrats. And what happened was that you began 40 years up to Trump of taking away veterans benefits and all the medical benefits and all the educational benefits and all the environmental protections and all the Social Security. I mean, these were being stripped away. This was a revolution that happened after the late 70s with coming in of Reagan. And the Democrats didn't stand up to that revolution. It wasn't popular, but what happened in probably the biggest political earthquake in America, the working people of America migrated. There was, the real migration was not across the border, as important as that was. It was across parties from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party.
Right.
And what drove that? The Democrats abandoned their effort to sort of deal centrally with the economic issues. That's sort of what I call the positive populist agenda. If you've got a right-wing populism going, and Reagan had some of that and so forth, the only way you can attract people and make a difference, save your, medical benefits, is have an agenda which is really transformative, because the New Deal started that way. There was a Great Depression, the country was in a catastrophic set, and Roosevelt said, look, in the 20s, the 1920s, and the 1890s, was, go back in history. Forgive me, but there's always history. There's a real
Yeah,
history.
no, I'd say it's right there for you.
Yeah, and so we have this long history up to the New Deal where America just abandoned the workers, and finally you had a depression and people rose up, and so we had what I call a regime change at home. You had a new regime with Roosevelt and the New Deal, but then there was this period with the Vietnam War and stagflation. You got another economic crisis, and Reagan came in, what you called neoliberal, which is just really a fancy word for saying extremely laissez-faire capitalism, which totally strips ordinary workers of any rights or any benefits.
Right.
You had 40 years of that crap. I mean, it's just nonstop. And I mean, even Obama didn't, the wealth gap between rich blacks and poor blacks grew under Obama. I think Obama did good things, but the Democratic Party abandoned its economic agenda. And that's what is at the heart of what I'm showing in this book, is central to democracy. You've got to get a party which is identifying with the needs of ordinary people and going full out for a regime change that says enough with these billionaires dominating the government, dominating the whole economy, dominating the world, sending AI to monitor our communications. They're monitoring everything we say on our phones. I had a student tell me the other day, I didn't know that his feed is telling him that it's time to eat now. The AI knows at what time he eats regularly. I mean, it's just, so there's a kind of surveillance and spying that's part of this far right populism, all in the name of.
I want to pause there, Charlie. So let's do this. I think we're transitioning to talk about what the left populism looks like. So let me do this. Let's take a break for our sponsor this week. We've got a great sponsor. We'll take a moment for our sponsor. I want to come back. I want to have a really deep dive in this concept of what a left-wing populism should look like. And as we go forward in this election year, because it's the midterms, what that should look like for so many. And we've seen it instances of. So,
and you're such a good guy to do it with, because you're the example we need. That really is.
I appreciate that. So let's take a pause. We'll be right back. You guys probably guessed that I spend hours sitting in meetings and watching events. And if you follow me, you'll also know I follow my favorite band around the country. I'll show up hours early for a spot on the rail at the concerts. And I often have to give up comfort to look good. Too often I have to put on clothes that don't fit right or makes for a long day. So luckily I'm building my wardrobe now with Mack Weldon. I can have comfort and style at the same time. Mack Weldon's Ace collection makes it effortless to look put together while feeling truly comfortable. I'm a working guy. I mean, you guys know this. I'm going 100 miles an hour every day, all day. I need easy, comfortable, stylish clothes, and I can't spend all day feeling my clothes don't fit or worry about how I look. If I am in a meeting or making an impromptu speech, I don't want to worry that I look out of style. Mack Weldon hits all those points and also makes it easy to be stylish and look good at the same time. So this is a time to add comfort and flair to your layers this year, 2026. Mack Weldon appeals to me because it easily balances classic pieces with updated details. You keep me looking sharp and up to date in a very busy lifestyle that I lead. It's all not flashy. It's classic, always a style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. With the Ace line, ease and self-assurance have never been more comfortable. I can pick from comfortable but nice sweatpants, shorts, sweatshirts, even blazers. Get everything you need from regular everyday clothes to my favorite Henleys. As you know, I love my Henleys, and even the most comfortable underwear is available from Mack Weldon right now. So they put comfort right next to style, and that's why you should check it out and join. Upgrade your collection for the new year with new bomber jackets. They've got half zips, sweats, crew necks, and more, all at MackWeldon.com. And you get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with code FRED. Mack Weldon's Ace Collection. Comfortable anywhere. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code FRED. That's MackWeldon.com and code my name, Fred. Check them out. You won't regret it. Great clothes, great comfort, great style. Thanks for sponsoring our show. All right, we're back. So, Charlie, thank you so much. Yeah. So, let's talk about that. So like, so we saw Mr. Mamdani win in New York City. There's an inkling there. I mean, every talks about the high affordability crisis. So
Right.
for our audience to understand, so I better understand when you talk about a left wing populism.
Right.
Let's describe what that looks like, and what does that what do you how do you recognize the elements of that?
Well, I mean, it's just basically a recognition that corporate America has taken over control. What is populism? Populism is ordinary people dealing with the system, the establishment, whoever is running the country that they see. And so populism, whether it's right, claims to be sort of reflecting the needs and speaking for ordinary people against this establishment. Now, Trump's establishment was really, he was saying it was foreigners, it was immigrants, it was people helping him. He sort of diverted people's attention from the real people running the country. What a left-leaning populism does, it says, yeah, Trump is right. We need a big, he ran on the idea, I'm going to shake things up. I'm going to, we've got the ordinary people, and he got a base of working class people to support him. But then he did everything with the billionaires to make their lives worse, like strip away their medical benefits and strip away their veterans benefits, right? So what left-wing populism does, it embraces the same idea that the country is in deep, deep, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking about, but I'm going to say deep.
Oh, you're allowed. You're allowed to. We're allowed to. This is the internet, man. We can cuss all we want. We are.
Oh,
We are.
to get onto the ship. Our
We're deep shit right now.
corporate oligarchy.
Yeah.
We've never had in the history of the world, never, ever, Fred, had there been this few people with this much money and this much power. I mean, it's really not hyperbole, and I show this in the book. This is a truly, I mean, Satch is growing up in a generation which is facing the most concentrated amount of wealth and power that we've ever seen in history.
Right.
I'm not exaggerating.
That's not exact. No, it's not.
No.
People. It's funny. We talked about a new Gilded Age. This is far beyond the Gilded.
This is
This
way beyond
is
the first
far-
Gilded Age. Yeah,
Yeah.
the current billionaires make, the early, Rockefeller and, JP Morgan, they look tiny compared to
They look like amateurs, don't they? I mean,
absolutely.
And this little things that they were like building museums and stuff. I mean, who does that? You know.
We have 3 billionaires who have more wealth than everybody in Africa and about half the country in the United States. So what left-wing populism does, it says, Trump was right that we do need populism. He's selling a phony deal. It's not real populism. He's going to join with these billionaires who are the richest people in history and are screwing the working class really bad. But a left-wing populism takes that seriously and said, our number one agenda is to look at Fred Wellman's medical and how they're going to take that friggin' disability that he's earned away from him, right? And it's going to stand up and it's going to deal with all the lies that you're dealing with and all the sort of ways in which they fool around with, in the name of helping ordinary people, actually screwing them really badly. I mean, like your story, I'm going to remember it because it's such a perfect example of what I'm writing about in this book. I mean, you truly are. When I do a new edition of this book, you're going to be right there in a big way, Fred. Really, really, because it is a perfect case of how what a left-wing progressive populism does is it takes people like Fred Wellman and say, look, this is the backbone of the country. These are the people who have really made the country great. And what we need is a politics and a coming together as a community of people who are going to fight unequivocally as hard as it takes to bring these ordinary people back into power. That takes what I call a regime change at home. It starts with Trump, but it even has to go back before Trump because Bush and Reagan were doing a lot of this before. We're living in a country which is sort of set up that allows people to. I wrote a book quite a few years ago called Corporation Nation, which is really about how corporations became the essentially unofficial government of the United States. And we're dealing with another form of that today. They're right in the White House, the billionaires. We have 11 billionaires in Trump's cabinet, and they're laying out policies which are gutting not only veteran benefits, but all forms of health benefits and all the social welfare benefits. And so the good news here is that, one, the polls are showing, even before Trump, people realized that this corporate power was destroying their lives. I mean, I showed data in the very first chapter, which surprised me. Republicans, as well as many, many Democrats and independents, say about 71% of them say they hate big corporations. They feel big corporations are swimming in the money that allows them to buy elections, buy candidates, align with Trump. Remember when Trump was inaugurated, you had
Yep.
seven
Yep.
richest people in the world.
Millionaires row right there in front. Yep.
Yeah. And they've continued to rule with them, and so we've got an oligarchy. And the good news is that people see it. And while they used to have a kind of negative view of any kind of populism, now we're in a period where things have gotten so difficult for ordinary people. I mean, your story is being told in families all across the
Oh,
country, one way or
millions.
another, right?
Millions.
Whether it's Medicaid or Social Security or,
Yep.
and we're a wealthy country. Countries that are less wealthy in Europe, my students are amazed that healthcare is free in most European countries. They go to college at very good colleges, as good as Boston College where I'm teaching, and they pay like 100 francs or for a semester or something like that. It's crazy. So
I say a lot as I talk to people that right now in America, your healthcare is dictated by shareholder value.
yeah,
That
exactly.
it's somebody's making a decision on what healthcare you get, and cutting it if they can, make sure that the price of the stock goes up, and
Right.
that should shop. And so you talk about that radical majority, right? You talk about how
Right. That's what's the good news here is that a super majority of people are seeing through the kind of rhetoric and seeing that. I mean, they have to because they can't afford their rent. I mean, my
right,
students,
it's reality. It's
yeah,
reality.
it's
I
just
call it cold hard reality. Like I think
right,
67, and then October, a study came out showing that 67% of Americans live
right.
paycheck to paycheck. And then you use the number 71% believe in
Uh,
large corporations. I mean, it can't be a coincidence. There's such
and they're supporting labor. That same percentage, they're not
yeah.
blaming their high taxes on unions anymore or on,
Nope.
they're saying, so this is why there's a good news, really. And, I'm so glad you took the story. I hope it's part of the broadcast because your
It is.
story is America's story right now. It truly is, Fred. I mean, it's a perfect sort of capsulation of what's happening. Millions and millions of Americans could tell their version of your story. And when they do so and they get together and share that story, just as you are, you're going to win your congressional race because there are an awful lot of people in your district who have that story to tell. And when you tell your story, and you have a voice that's now being heard, um, it's it's going to be reverberating around. And my argument in this book, Fighting Oligarchy, is that that story is being told and needs to be told more and more all over the country. I should bring you in my own book tour here. Really, you,
And so how do we do it? So wait, thank you. And I appreciate that. I mean, that means a lot to me as a matter of fact. I mean, so you're ready. You're calling for a regime change at home, and it's a
right,
positive. I mean, what I like and I
real
love
good thing. And
what I
America,
love with this, one of the things I like to do the show, Charlie, is tell, because we have the Midas touch, we call them the Midas Mighty, our audience here is, and we'll probably have a couple thousand watching this live tonight at 7. And that's amazing. And I always try to give, I say, here's what you can do. Like what I'm here from you is we have, like my story at the beginning about the veterans benefits does show that our voices, when we raise our voices in unity, you do say that, right? You say we're going to have to partner with people we may not even usually partner with, for example, right? To raise our voice. Is there an agenda you think for people like us or just people who are just watching the show that they
like
can
I say,
be part of
I
this
mean,
regime change?
we have this new protest coming up on March 28th.
Yep.
They say it's likely to be the biggest protest in US history. And what's going on here, which I like, is that there's more and more a coming together of these people who are concerned about democracy. Your show is called On Democracy, and they're realizing that being on democracy means dealing with these corporate billionaires who have stolen our democracy, right? And Trump is ruling in this very violent and authoritarian ways, and he's backed up by these big companies making money off the prisons of the
Yep.
holding immigrants and off the
Yep.
communications. I mean, look at Palantir and these big, huge billionaire. By the way, Palantir, which is the um, Palantir was founded by Peter Thiel, who was the mentor of J.D. Vance,
Yep.
the president. He didn't pay any taxes this year. He's making billions off government contracts to spy on you and me, and he's not paying any taxes. I like the fact that Warren Buffett says that he pays less taxes as the sixth or seventh biggest, richest man in the world than his secretary does, who makes $35,000. So
Same.
what we need to do is get out there on the streets with our neighbors and talk about our stories. A lot of it is stories. And, I mean, your story is very compelling. I'm gonna remember it for a long time because stories is what people know because it relates to their own experience. And then we
Right.
need to sort of connect with each other. One of the problems the Democratic Party has had is that it tends to create a kind of siloed politics where different distinct groups, it might be, Black young people, or it might be Asian Americans, or might be, these are important issues related to race and gender, these identity questions, but they run the danger of siloing people into separate little
Yeah.
compartments. And then they're competing against each other for the tidbits that the corporate powers run. So you've got to ultimately build this coalition of people and from many different, because people are being screwed over. They're being hurt by fires in Los Angeles, or they're being hurt by Medicaid destruction, or one of the red states in much of the country they're the ones that are really getting hit by Trump's cutting of all kinds of public benefits and safety benefits, and
Yeah.
particularly Medicaid, for example. So
Yeah, I have it here. I have it here. Well, in St. Louis, North St.
very
Louis,
good example.
we had the tornado go through North St. Louis. They're still struggling. They can't make it. FEMA's all but absent. The state governments now. I mean, the money doesn't matter. They don't want to help
Right.
people, and they're going to do everything they can to change it.
So there's a history of this. Like Martin Luther King, he said, "How can I have a civil rights movement here if we're not dealing with the problems of our economic?" I mean, he got killed. What he was doing? Remember what he was doing when he was killed? He was marching with sanitation workers that were on strike because they were getting paid like shit. I mean, they were just really. And so the civil rights movement was one example of a movement that was trying to deal with a very challenging war with an economy that was screwing garbage workers and a lot of other workers as well, right? And that's what made the civil rights movement successful. It brought together economic and national security and civil rights issues together, so that it wasn't just a race issue per se. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and I think the Democratic Party today is slowly understanding those lessons. Like I said, the New Deal brought together. It was the first time. We're such an amazing country. Do you know what percentage of workers are in unions today in the private sector in
The
America?
highest it's ever been. I know that. It's I think we're what 40% now. I can't remember.
No,
Forget my brain.
6%.
Yep,
In the
6.
New Deal. Now, in countries which have medical care, health care, higher education bill, it's like in much of Europe, it's 70%. I mean,
Yeah.
what Reagan did during his regime change was that he just wiped out unions. And as you probably know, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, and Trump are all together in court right now suing to make unions unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So they're just going flat out and saying, we don't want workers to getting together. We don't work. There's dispersing workers. You work in an Amazon warehouse. You're going to work for 2 years, really hard. They can barely stop to get a drink or a snack. And they're out of there in 2 years. And while they're trying to organize a union, they're fighting hard. And that's really, really important.
Yeah.
The companies are not making it easy for them. They're really
No.
making it hard. But the
Well,
good
Charlie, this is great.
people are really acting, and they're listening and telling your story. I mean, I'm so glad we talked, Fred, because your story is the story in many ways in my book. My book does is just provide in a very simple way a kind of historical and current way of thinking about how to move our country, and particularly the Democratic Party, into a new regime, sort of a regime at home, a new kind of. We got to recognize we're in a kind of revolutionary crisis. I mean, did you see Trump just wiped out climate change and environmental regulation afterward? I think fires in California, and we just had like very cold weathers and other factors.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many elements to this crisis because, as you said before, when you turn everything into a commodity, which you just sell for profit, whether it's healthcare or it's, then, everything else is what they call an externality. The cost of it is external to the real thing that's going on. And so everything we care about becomes irrelevant to these people. It's something they don't have to worry about. It's externalized to them. So the revolution we need is this positive populism that brings all this stuff right back into the center of the conversation and means that companies have to deal with it. If they're going to impose these costs, they're going to pay a big price for it. So what the book is doing is providing a real positive view of how you really can. And your story, I wish it were in there because it tells it beautifully.
Thanks so much. And let's bring the book up. That's a perfect place to end and show the book. So Charlie, where can they find the book?
So
Pick it up. And you write clearly, you write for average people to read. It's not
yeah,
scientific
it's
research.
very personal. My books are read. My students tell me they're very easy to read. It. They're like, so I write for ordinary people. I think places online like Amazon are very easy to get it.
Right.
Probably independent bookstores, but yeah, I've written this for ordinary people because that's what the book is about. It's about people who have stories to tell like you do. And I think if people read this story, they'll see their own story in there and they'll figure out this is a way that I can move forward with Fred Wellman to really make a difference.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. What a joy this has been. This is great. I'm so glad I had this chance to have this conversation. Kudos
Yeah,
to teams
thank you
reaching out.
so much.
Thanks for joining
Good
us,
luck
sir.
with your race. Good luck
I
to
appreciate it.
Thatch, and I hope we'll be in touch. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining us. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
What a great conversation. I love guests that I have a hard time stopping. The great thing about being a podcaster and on a YouTube show like this, as opposed to being on TV, is it's all 30-second sound bites. It's all getting getting as much as you can in as short time as possible. And I hate that. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I wanted to kind of transition to something that's a little bit heavier. I want to make sure that we remember some folks very close to me. So for those of you who've been following me a long time, many of you probably haven't. I'm a 22-year Army combat veteran. I served in the United States Army. I went to combat 4 times. I was an Army aviator for the majority of my career. Well, all my career, but I served as a spokesman at the end. But for the majority of my career, I spent my time in the cockpit of helicopters, either the OH-58 Scouts or the UH-60 Blackhawk for my last tour in Iraq in 2003. That's a dangerous business. But today is sort of a special kind of Memorial Day anniversary. Today is 35 years since the Desert Storm. For those you don't know, the air war Desert Storm was unfolding right now, 35 years ago, February of 1991. The ground war didn't start for another week or two. But during that period, my unit, the 24th Infantry Division, if you may know, is the Big Left Hook. We moved to the border of Iraq, preparing to invade Iraq, and our division asked us to conduct night reconnaissance missions. And so, if you're not familiar with what I did, I was a scout helicopter platoon leader in a Apache helicopter battalion, and our mission was to navigate and lead the flights of Apaches to their targets or during reconnaissance missions. We did the navigating with maps. Old. We didn't have GPS then. We just did it with maps and line of sight and following. And the story of that night is the reason I mentioned is because today is 35 years to the day when I lost these 2 men. Um, that's Hal and Mike That's Hal Reichel, and Mike Daniels, Specialist Mike Daniels. That's our OH-58. So Hal and Mike were 2 of my soldiers in the scout platoon of Alpha Company, 1st 24th Aviation. Hal and Mike were lost on a night reconnaissance mission in Iraq, a mission that we were tasked with that only required 2 of our 3 air crews to fly. And that day, as we were preparing for the mission, they came to me, and my instructor pilot, Dennis Midgley, came to me and said, "Hey, look, here's the deal, sir. We recognize you're the senior officer, you're the lieutenant, but of the 3 of us, you're the lowest night vision goggle experience pilot. You've got the least sleep lately because, unfortunately, we were planning for the ground war, so I was up at night planning. You got the least sleep, and you should sit this one out." And the thing about being an aviator is it's much more than like infantry follow me. You do have to defer to the seniority and experience of your crews when you're flying night vision goggles in pitch black conditions in a desert. And so after talking to my boss about it, we decided I would sit that flight out, and Hal and Mike would take my place leading a 2 Apaches into Iraq. That night they flew into Iraq, and it was winter, and believe it or not, in the Middle East, there still is moisture, and they hit a fog bank. And for what we know, they became separated from the Apache flight and crashed into the ground over 90 knots and were lost immediately when they crashed into the ground. For me, a lot of times I wrote about it today on my Substack is it's sort of silence. So one of the things that defines, I think, my life is um, uh, a silence after the event, if you will. As you guys know, I've had some tragedy in my life, trauma. I lost Hal and Mike, and I lost my wife and my unborn child in a car accident, and some others. My friend, I've had friends lost since then. And for that night, what got us was we were constantly on the radio calling out to them, seeing if they're available. The other air crews had tried to reach them while they were flying. We spent the night in the headquarters, the higher headquarters, constantly transmitting, calling other units to see if they were in, it maybe landed there, because that happened. You got separated. It's dark, black. You just land wherever you can find safety. And we were hoping that was the case. Unfortunately, the next morning we flew a flight of Apaches and Blackhawks into Iraq and found their crashed aircraft. And they didn't survive. They left behind two wonderful ladies, two widows. My God, Mike had just married Misty at 19 years old, his high school sweetheart. They'd only gotten married in April. So I think about that day today. And the reason it pertains to is it's always led me as a leader. The lesson I learned from that night is that you as a leader have the responsibility to weigh the risks and benefits of your decisions and understand that in certain positions, you are going to make decisions that could lead someone to die, someone to lose their wealth, someone to lose their job, someone to lose everything. In this case, I made a decision to send these men on a mission instead of me, and they died. And as we look at leaders today, at this very moment, as you and I are on this show talking to each other, as we're talking, Donald Trump is gathering a fleet of U.S. ships off the coast of Iran, telegraphing that he wants to attack Iran. He's going to send thousands of our service members into danger. And I don't think he cares about their lives. I don't think he's weighing the possible loss of our sons and daughters, moms and dads, uncles, aunts, kids, when he's making these decisions. I don't believe that Donald Trump feels the weight of that decision, that it could mean loss. They could be injured. They'd be killed. We know this because he said things. When he killed Soleimani in his first term, and Iran responded with rocket attack on our soldiers in Iraq, and many of them were injured with very severe brain injuries from the deafening impacts, the sound waves, the pressure waves that give men and women concussions and traumatic brain injuries that they'll deal with the rest of their lives. He called it a little headache. He dismissed their injuries as minor. We know that soldiers were injured and shot at during the attack in Caracas where he grabbed Maduro. He has never talked about it. We've never heard about those men and women. So here we are. Okay. And now, yet again, on the day that I am honoring and remembering these young men who lost their lives in combat for the United States of America to invade Iraq and take back Kuwait from Saddam Hussein, we once again have our forces in the Middle East with a president not even consulting Congress, not even discussing the risk. They can't even, when Carolyn Levitt spoke yesterday, she couldn't actually come up with a specific reason we needed to attack Iran today. She literally said, well, there's many reasons. What are they, Carolyn? My God, at least George Bush went to the UN and went to Congress and made his case. They're not even doing that. So I talk about this context of these men who I lost 35 years ago for several reasons. Number one, I want you to know their names. 1991 was before the internet. There's no Facebook page for Hal and Mike. There's no memorial page. There's a few websites that talk about Hal. Hal, for example, and Mike. Hal, for example, had a thing where he did secret acts of kindness. It was his thing. Hal would mow somebody's lawn under the cover of darkness. It was his thing. And some of his friends carried that tradition on. But there's no Facebook. There's no Instagram page to go. It's before all that. So I like to bring up these men when I can. And so you remember who they were, that these two men hopped in that aircraft right there. And a day later, we lost them. And so I want to remember them to understand the context of what we do. We should have the leaders we elect that go to Congress, go to the presidency, go to governorships, wherever it may be, city mayors, who understand that the decisions they're making have consequences, that feel the weight of those decisions, that understand that when they make these decisions, people could lose a lot. And if you've got someone you're looking at voting for, and they don't seem to really give a damn about the decisions they'll have to make, don't vote for them, no matter what party they are. So with that, I appreciate you being here. It's a tough day, but it's also a day to honor real heroes, American heroes, and remember all those things. So with that, thanks for joining me this week on the show. I really appreciate you guys being here. We've got a lot going on right now. follow our Substack, fpwellman.substack.com. I did write about that today. Pretty extensive piece about Pal and Mike and their loss. You can find that on our Substack. It's fpwellman.substack.com. I'd love you to do this, all free, of course. You can find out about our other work. It was mentioned briefly here that we're doing. That's important too. But it's a really important time for us to hold our leaders accountable and for us to band together and fight back. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about using your voices to express your dismay and band together with people. And let's not fight amongst us. Let's figure out how to beat these folks back, take back our country, and lead with honor, because that's what we need to do now. I'm Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman. I appreciate you joining us this week. I'll see you again next week right here on the Midas Touch Network, 7 p.m. Eastern. As always, have a great night.